House Intelligence Committee. Appearing here together, Republican Congressman Mike Turner of Ohio and Democratic Congressman Jim Himes of Connecticut. Gentlemen, welcome back to Meet the Press, and thank you for coming on together.
Thanks for having us.
Before we start on this stuff, this train derailment overnight happened in your congressional district. I know the shelter-in-place order is no longer. What more can you tell us? What more have you learned, and is the federal government responding?
Sure. This truly is outrageous. You know, Ohio is sort of the crossroads of America, both on the road and in rail. An unbelievable amount of goods travel through Ohio, some hazardous. What we've seen, recently with the risk to communities is unacceptable. Luckily, it seems we may have missed a bullet in this one, that this train may have been empty, and it looks like that hazardous materials is not going to be a threat to the community. We'll have to see.
Is it clear? Do you think it's clear that the freight industry isn't well regulated and needs to be?
Oh, absolutely. And the fact that we're having derailment after derailment shows really the lack of investment, the disinvestment in our infrastructure, and that needs to change.
Let me move to this. Congressman Himes, I'll start with this. I know both of you have been getting these briefings. Another warning to China. We heard it from the Secretary of State about arming Russia. Our reporting indicates that this actually came from our intelligence inside of Russia, confirmed around what's. How serious is this threat, and do we know if China has made a final decision?
Well, no question it's a serious threat. We've seen the Russian military obviously come apart. The Chinese could reverse that in the same way that the Iranians are helping the Russians right now. I think the administration is doing the right thing by saying, don't do this. Now, it doesn't surprise me at all that there's a debate inside China about whether they should do this. Hopefully, wisdom prevails. I couldn't help but note in the Chinese proposed peace plan, the 12th point said we need to focus on rebuilding rebuilding Russia. I can imagine the Chinese see a lot of business there. Obviously, if they're part of the Russian assault on Ukraine, they will not get that business. So, no, I don't think a final decision has been made, but I do think it's wise for us to say, don't go there.
Congressman Turner, you've noted that we have a different posture now on our intelligence. We're releasing more of it. Do you think more of it should be released to make sure the world believes us?
Right. Well, and obviously you've seen with the CIA director even calling out China on this issue, that they're considering it as a huge shift in policy. And what we're seeing is the administration using intelligence to try to impact the outcome of policy, right? So they're not just saying we happen to know this and looking to hold someone accountable. They're trying to thwart them, to stop them from doing this. The problem with China entering this is because, you've got the West giving weapons to Ukraine. You've got Russia depleting their stores. We obviously, the West together, have an ability to impact Ukraine greater than Russia alone does. There would be an inexhaustible source of weapons if China in its production capacity supported Russia, and that would change the dynamic.
What kind of intel do we have on the state of the Russian army, Congressman Himes? Meaning, we've seen some reports that they may be running out of munitions. They have some issues. What does our folks say?
Well, so neither Mike nor I can get too deep into any particular intel, but, you don't need to get too deep into intel. Consider the fact that you see every single day on television, which is the entire Russian army cannot take a town that nobody had ever heard of a year ago, the town of Bakhmut. Now, Mike and I have been doing this long enough that we remember when we literally devoted hundreds of billions of dollars and much of our national security apparatus to this beast of a Russian military. Today we see that they can't, if even with the push of the president, Vladimir Putin, they can't take a town. That doesn't mean they're not still dangerous. They have nuclear weapons, but they are not what we thought they were.
I want to play something. Sergei Lavrov was at the G20, Congressman Turner. And wait do you hear the reaction to something he said here? Let me play it.
The war which we are trying to stop and which was launched against us using Ukrainian people, of course, it influenced the policy of Russia.
There's nothing like being able to say the phrase "the world is laughing at them."
Completely.
The world is laughing at them.
Spontaneously.
What should the West use a moment like that for?
Well, the thing about both Putin, Lavrov, and even Medvedev, although he's supposed to be the new face of a new Russia, come from an era where they controlled Eastern Europe. They could say things that were not true, and people believed them because they controlled information. Today, information can't be controlled. So the laughability of what they're saying, the ridiculousness of what they're saying, is easily exposed.
All right, let me move to the issue of these classified documents. Nobody seems to be satisfied with what you got. Congressman Hein, does that include you? Were you satisfied with the briefing?
So we have a lot more work to do. Look, I think as the leaders of the Intelligence Committee, our number one job is to make sure that the DNI, the FBI, whoever needs to do it, does everything they need to do to protect the sources and methods that might have been exposed were any of those documents to have been out in the wild. So there's a lengthy process to figure out that. And I can't speak for Mike, but I will tell you that though we have been briefed, we've got a lot more to do to make sure that the government is doing what it should be doing.
Well, let me ask specifically, do you know what the Trump docs are, Congressman Turner?
Do
you know what the Biden docs are, and do you know what the Pence docs are?
No, but there are some things that we do know. And first off,
Let me stop there. No? They didn't share with you those things in a classified setting?
Right.
Why?
Well, first off, in the things that we do know, one of the things we know is that the FBI is not being forthcoming. They're not giving us the information. They're claiming that it's going to affect the outcome of their investigation, which of course it can't, because the people who are the targets of their investigation know what are in those documents. Right. And we have the clearance and the ability to look at these documents. We also know from Avril Haines that she said that she was not consulted prior to the raid on Trump's Mar-a-Lago home, that in fact it was not a national security basis. So as we go through this process, as they give us the category of the documents and their assessment as to who had access to them, who did not have access to them, we're beginning to build an understanding. But the thing that we know is that it's unbelievable that administration after administration is apparently sloppy and messy in their use of classified documents. And that's one thing on a bipartisan basis we have to address well beyond just this. This has to change, where classified documents are under a certain amount of control.
But Congressman Himes, do you at least know the classification levels of these docs? Do you know, is there a distinction between the Trump docs, the Biden docs, and the Pence docs, or not?
So we have not been shown anything that would allow us to draw that conclusion, and we got to be a little careful here, because what we were shown.
So you weren't briefed much.
Well, we were briefed, but let's just say that neither one of us are satisfied that we got enough information to execute our primary responsibility of making sure that sources and methods have been protected. We've got more to learn before we can be satisfied on that.
So right now, you have no idea whether these were the highest level
or the mid level? We didn't say no idea.
Okay.
Again, we can't get too into the details. We got a flavor for what was there, and I won't speak for Mike, but I will tell you, having been given a flavor, this is a very serious issue. This wasn't stuff that we can say clearly does not matter. It matters.
In all three cases?
Well, again, we don't know. We don't know yet.
One thing I would tell you, Chuck, which is important, which is also the symbolism of the fact that Jim and I are here together.
I was just going to say, Devin Nunes and Adam Schiff, I don't know if would have done this.
Right. We have shifted, and it takes two to shift to a bipartisan basis. And you see it on the Senate side, too, with Marco Rubio, Senator Warner. And the approach to this issue of the Biden docs, the Trump docs, and the Pence docs, we're looking at holistically, what do we have to do to fix this? How do we address this? What were the risks involved? And you have to understand also that without Congress having asked, there wasn't even a risk assessment being done. We were the ones who initiated this. That's part of the concern.
I get the sense that the intel community doesn't trust Congress. And you guys, is that fair? Do you think you guys have to rebuild you have to prove to them that you're trustworthy with secrets?
I would say it's more of a tension between the FBI and Congress than it is the intelligence community, because
we're having more FBI in Congress.
Absolutely. And I think that's going to come to a head over the next couple of years. You're seeing it in a number of areas where they're just not, they are not special. They don't have greater privileges than the president does. And they're continuing to act as if they have some privilege to be able to operate without congressional oversight.
Congressman Himes, I'm curious what that piece about sort of the tension between Main Justice and the FBI having to do with retrieving the classified documents from Mar-a-Lago. It looks like there was fear going in of retribution. The FBI are they more concerned about perception than whether they're doing their job? Are you worried about this?
Well, two things about the FBI. First of all, and Mike's right, they are subject to congressional oversight. Secondly, they do have to preserve the integrity of their investigation, and there are investigations on board right now. So we need to work with them, because both of us, everybody wants them to be able to do investigations in an unsloppy manner. We've got too much of a history of investigations in a somewhat sloppy manner. But of course there was consternation. Look, it's one thing to conduct a raid on average Joe citizen, to conduct a raid on a former president who, and I hope I don't insult my good chairman here, who was sort of known for his aggressive retribution against people he didn't like. I'm sure that got a lot of discussion. But look, the lesson to be drawn here is if you don't want to raid on your home, don't take a year to cough up documents that we know are out there.
The COVID origin. Go ahead.
Or 6 years, because Biden took 6.
Fair enough.
The one aspect that's important here is that Merrick Garland did an unbelievable, terrible political miscalculation. He appointed a special prosecutor against Trump, not realizing he was going to end up having to appoint one against his own boss.
Right.
And how that's going to play out is going to be amazing.
Let's talk about the COVID origin situation. I think a lot of people were surprised to learn that the Energy Department had an intelligence agency. And in fairness, and I some of us know that it's true. They deal with our nukes. There's a reason for it. But a lot of people didn't know. But they labeled it low confidence. So how should the public take that?
Well, it's not actually been released yet. These are all leaks that are reporting this.
Great.
So
all the more helpful to messing up this story.
So we will neither confirm nor deny that they actually said that. But let's assume that they did. In all of this, because there's no direct evidence, we don't have China admitting it, we don't have Wuhan lab handing these things over. Right. All this is being assessed by looking at other aspects of the release. But I can tell you what one thing that's of great concern is that the 90-day review that was undertaken, where there was both a classified report and an unclassified report that came out from the intelligence community, in my opinion, they don't match. If you read the unclassified version and then you read the classified version, you would have thought that there would have been other things, other conclusions in the unclassified version. And I think that's what we're seeing now is beginning to leak out, is that there are people who are saying, wait, I disagree with the underlying conclusion of the unclassified version.
Congressman Himes, we're told this is still a minority view, but the FBI director basically, it seems, to use the Energy Department leak as he wanted to go out there and he reaffirmed something that we had already known, that the FBI was leaning more towards leak.
Yeah, look, I mean, you need to take a step back here. And just as Mike said, we have so few facts because the Chinese regime has obfuscated. Look, this is hard to figure out when you can do it in Atlanta at the CDC if something goes wrong. We have so few facts that inevitably different agencies are going to arrive at different conclusions. And when an agency slightly adjusts its interpretation, as the Department of Energy may have done, that doesn't mean that all of a sudden the government has a firm view. It may be forever before we actually know exactly what happened.
Don't we need a 9/11 commission, something like this? I mean, isn't this
we need the
necessary?
Chinese to cooperate.
Don't we need something like this?
Well, the Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, has appointed a COVID select committee that is bipartisan and is beginning this process. In addition, there is now a China select committee looking at really 360 the issues with respect to the national security threats of China. So those things are moving forward in Congress beyond just what our committee's doing and other committees of jurisdiction. There are now committees that are solely focused on just this issue.
All right, Congressman Turner and Himes, this was terrific. I look forward to doing this quite a bit with you guys over the next year.